Okay, so we're good. Let me share my screen again. 1 second. All right, so in terms of news, it's a little bit light this time of year, and actually this year in general. But one thing that did catch my eye, I'm not sure if folks saw this too on the WordPress blog, but there's an announcement for a WordPress AI team that formed. So this was fairly recently. I think the announcement was from May 25th. I think they've had at least one meeting since the announcement. So at least I found this interesting. As you know, if you've joined some of our sessions in the past year, we talked quite a bit about AI and specifically AI as it relates to WordPress. And in fact, I think maybe even last summer, if I think about it, I think last summer we started showing some of the AI capabilities that were coming out. Some of them were in the WordPress.com, the paid slash free offering. But now this team, supposedly their mission is they're going to be focused on accelerating and coordinating AI projects across the WordPress core ecosystem. Obviously, there's things that happen outside of WordPress core. So, the thought is it provides the unified team will ensure alignment across WP. And sort of like what we saw with Gutenberg, for people who aren't familiar, like the block editor really started off as a plugin first before it kind of got introduced into core. So I think it's kind of a good idea as well that they're going to do a plugin first approach. So kind of work on this kind of proof of concept, we want to call it plugin, to have AI capabilities in there and then roll them into core eventually. Because as we know, as we talked about last month, it doesn't seem like this year in particular, there's going to be many core releases of WordPress. So a couple of other things this is, I think, from their first meeting, they talked about some of their strategies. And again, I'll put a link to this later in the chat. But some of the first things they're going to try to tackle, at least their principles, are having a provider agnostic LLM. LLM is large language model client abstraction. So as people are probably familiar with, there's Chat GPT, there's Gemini, there's all these different LLM slash GPT models out there. So within a programming language like PHP, which WordPress is built off of, there really isn't anything today to kind of directly speak to those types of models. So I think they're going to create some sort of abstraction layer slash libraries that you can use from like WordPress slash PHP to interact with those providers. Part of that too, with any kind of tool, is having this idea of having a registry, so a definition slash registry. So that's also the LLMs. I think my understanding of this was at least LLMs, as they're looking at your website, perhaps you would be able to register capabilities. So I think this goes along with this whole idea that they talk about these days called like agentic, AI. So like you think of your site and other ones as agents that basically some some master AI can orchestrate all these wonderful things together. So apparently you can register, hey, I can do this, and that was my reading of this. And then finally, it's more under the covers kind of stuff. So these protocols, so this MCP, this model context protocol, it's another one that just allows AI tools to kind of read resources and things like that. So a lot of this, to me, the way I understand it, is the first phase of this is very under the covers kind of building blocks. But in their blog article, which I will again post here, they did start talking about some use cases I think that they want to start tackling to begin with. And to be honest, I was a little, I don't know if others have read this, but I was a little disappointed in it. Some of the use cases seem very, very, I don't know, focused on like a WordPress core group. Like they have something in here. I don't know where it is. It's something about, oh, here it is. What is it in here? Anyway, there's something in there about like having the ability to use AI tools to basically look at like when people submit plugins and things to the repository, to look at those and like, I don't know. I didn't find that interesting, but I'm sure it might be a big thing for them. So anyway, that's we'll see what comes of this. Again, be on the lookout. Maybe we'll hopefully throughout the summer as they start to introduce things, and maybe as they start to put a plugin out there. I don't think there is one yet. That could be something we can start to look at here as well. So
Right, let me jump in real quick
yeah, sure. Go ahead, Peter.
on the AI thing, which is yeah, they're actually they there's been a few conversations afterward too, and they're trying to really make the point that this is not necessarily about using AI to put into WordPress to have a content creator, for example, like a lot of the AI tools do right now. It is to figure out how the inevitable world of AI can help the WordPress from top to bottom, inside and out. So while it's a good point. While it's not exciting in some cases, I think there's a great opportunity to use AI to do things like scrub the repository, for example, which has tens of thousands, literally 60,000 plugins or whatever the number is right now, of which I would argue that I don't know what much smaller number than that would be. 5,000 are need to be there kind of thing, or whatever. And just, that would be an opportunity of using AI to help, as an extension of the core team. So there's a lot there, because there certainly are a lot of people who are concerned that it'll be all about generating content, because goodness knows right now we are already getting into a point where they call it AI slop, in terms of the content that is AI generated, because it's so easy to just do. And it's just like, okay, here's a new skill to develop, which is how to be aware of what AI generated content looks like, which is
A
pretty.
discerning reader slash thinker. Yes, that's always
Yeah, yeah,
a
exactly.
good skill to
But
have.
there's some really interesting. I actually watched a video today, real quick, and that's what summer school's about. To allow us go on quick tangents, which is a somebody really saying how there are certain things that happen in AI generated content that don't typically happen. Now, granted, there's the immediately noticing. People don't talk that way, sure, but things like, here's one that I found really interesting in the written word, using an M dash. So there we have hyphens, we have an N dash, we have an M dash. AI loves the M dash. So somebody is just generating content, pasting it in, and it's filled with M dashes. AI likes to do things in the odd numbers of threes and fives, because that's kind of preferred in terms of like generating lists and things, repeating things a certain way, and quite often, even on like now it's YouTube channels that are faceless, and it's just like, okay, you're not just repeating what you just said, and you're couching your content to take. So it's all of these things, but so that would be a concern, to make it that much easier just to have AI constantly generate content, and I'm sure that's going to be a big part of the discussions coming up. But
Yeah, we'll
so
see. Like I said,
yeah,
I think this is something interesting to see. I like the fact that, at least in theory, it could be a thing to consolidate and unify. And to be honest, also, as we talked about before, some of us, myself included, are a little disappointed that there may not be any big core updates this year. So at least I'm happy to see something moving along. And if it's just the AI stuff, so be it. So
but
anyway,
now
yep.
that's another news item, which is Automatic is now putting hours back um, into core team.
Oh,
So scrub the one major update a year is
oh, really?
already a maybe, right?
Oh, I didn't hear
Because
that.
now he's going back to, I say he, Automatic, Matt Mullenweg, going back to a level of the hours that they were putting in before. So we'll see what that ultimately means. So there
Yeah,
actually has been quite a lot of news, especially
yeah.
since WordCamp Europe, which we haven't really talked about much with that.
How
Did you
about
talk
you?
about events, by the way?
I'm sorry, say that
Uh,
again.
Upcoming events? Did we mention that yet? I
I
don't
didn't
think so.
see any big
So
ones.
let
Why
me grab the
don't you call
screen and
out,
I'll
Peter?
show a couple. Yeah,
Yeah, why don't you call
because
one out? And then if you have a tool or tip, or you can skip the tool or tip, because we can do it's up to you.
no, I'll show you a tool or two.
Yeah.
Can't get away from that, because I found something kind of interesting that I liked. I thought people might be interested in. Um, so this is yet another source I showed last time, the URL link that I use that kind of gives me just the online events, which I like. That's this string here going to upcoming events. There's another. I could put this back in. I'll put this back in the chat. WP World does a lot of things where it's also reporting on stuff. That's why this is showing up. But we've got upcoming is it's in July, but it's WP Campus, and they do have, if you register for it, there is I believe it's free still online. And what this is a WordPress conference focused on higher education. But in previous years, I've gone, and there's been some really interesting things, especially around using it in those types of organizations, nonprofits. Accessibility is important, so there's a lot of really good things at WP Campus. And then the unsung, and I'm not planning on going, even though it's the closest one. Well, it's one of the closer ones in the region. Is WordCamp Montclair coming up in a couple of weeks? That's in New Jersey. So this one is undershared, I think, at
That's
times.
funny, 'cause, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up here because I don't think I even saw the New Jersey one on the main WordPress.
Yeah,
Maybe I missed it. I thought I looked last week when I was creating the news slide.
yeah. I don't know why this one flies under the radar every year, but it does.
Yeah.
It seems that to be fair, people promoting it, maybe I'm just missing it, but at the same time,
Oh, there it
uh,
is. Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
there are plenty of tickets left. So
cool.
if you're in the area or want to experience a WordCamp for the first time here, and just one of the things that's kind of neat back on the this WP World site, I'm not sure exactly where they have it, but they do have a WordCamp um, a, a, attendee tool, like what to expect at a WordCamp and things like that. So I forget where it is exactly, but it's kind of a neat thing. All right, let's
Oh,
get
you
to
know what?
the
Hey, just quick updates on this. Sue and Lance put in a couple interesting things. So Lance put in that WP Campus. It says in-person events canceled, replaced with a new online programming. Okay, so that's not going to be in person.
it's
And
not
then
it's
Sue put
just online.
in something similar. Well, not, yeah, online summits. Okay.
So is it online and paid?
That's a good question. Is it on upcoming
Well,
new
I could.
online
It's
events?
not one event. It's going to
Right.
be a series and it's not at the same, at like a 2 day thing.
Okay. All right. We can look into that a little bit. All right. Thanks for the update, guys. Peter, how about
Yeah,
a quick
thanks. I'll have to take a look.
tool or tip? Let's jump into some stuff here. What do you got?
Okay, tool tip. So the tool, I still got the screen, right?
Yep.
All right. So a while back, I saw a video from the admin bar about creating interesting transition effects between pages. And the simplest one was, and I'll call up our site, was a piece of a CSS code. Right now, if I just switch I think I have the plugin active right now. You're already seeing a transition. Let me go back here to the dashboard. I'm going to disable the plugin that I'm about to show you because it was already on in my not super fast. Yeah, I'll deactivate that. So when you're on a site and you're going from page to page, normally just if I go here and I click on a page, it just goes boom. Now you're on that page. Okay, and that's fine. That works fine. But if you add a little piece of CSS, and this is not hard CSS, this is easy CSS. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to turn it on, show you, and then I'm going to show you a plugin that this all happened very quickly within the same amount of time. So that's why it was kind of like I'm showing you the quick little story here. There's a little piece of CSS. Let me not. I have it commented out. I will uncomment it. Right now, I'm just in the customizer, and I'm doing under additional CSS. I'm putting this line of code. I'll paste it in the chat after. However, if you are using CSS code on your site, but again, if you're using a classic theme, the easiest thing is to use the additional CSS. This little code that says animation duration, and you can set the time for something called view transition. I'm going to publish that. I'm not 100% sure you're going to be able to see this on the Zoom meetup, but now that I've made that active, let me go back to the homepage, and it should, if I go here, did you see it? Did you see a little fade? I don't know if it worked. Okay.
Yeah, it was quick. Good.
Yeah, it's quick, and but see how it's doing a transition fade with just that little piece of code built in. And I thought by itself.
Oh, okay.
I don't know
So
if
is
I
the
can run.
transition, Peter, is the transition basically on the page load? Is it like the whole page display that's where it's transitioning? Or is it like,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
I missed this. Did you click on the post from that page and then it
yeah.
transitioned?
So right now with that one piece of CSS, it's for the entire site. Whenever I move from page to page,
Yeah.
it's going to do a fade transition.
Okay.
That's that's at its simplest level. So all that does is it weirdly, if that's something that fits your branding and whatever, it literally just kind of takes the edge off of of the the change of the page. So that's the simplest way to do it. But since then, a plugin has come out, and in fact, it's this is introducing the view transition plugin. I'll put this link in, and it's literally called View Transitions, which takes it to the next step because there are things that you can do with the CS transition where you can actually move things and connect things from page to page, but it's a little bit challenging if you're especially if you're doing like a post loop where you're showing like all the posts that you have and link to it. But now he's come out, he being Felix Amst has come out with View Transitions, this plugin. I'm going to come over here to my CSS. I'm just going to take this out for now, just so that it's not interrupting us. So now I should just be back to like, the quick snap to is not doing a fade. Now, if I go to the plugin, it is on the repository. I'm going to activate it. And then when you activate it, you get under your reading settings. So it adds it to the readings settings. In fact, it's easier just to link right from the, let me go to view transitions down here. You can see these are where I test a lot of things. We could play with any of these later on. If you go to settings for view transitions, which is now activated, this now gets appended to the bottom of the reading settings. So your settings here, and now you have new view transitions. So if you just go with default, what it's going to do is it's going to look at the thing, your title and your featured image, and it's going to make those part of the transition. So we'll just save those changes. I don't need the customizer anymore. So now if I refresh this and I click on this, it's literally going to transition by moving the image to full size and moving, and depending on, I don't know if he's added a speed setting yet, and moving the title. So it's a way of, again, transitioning between. Now it shrunk back down. So that's like kind of a view transition thing. And you can do things like, there are options of like, we'll just do the simple one here, where it's just another way of doing a transition. I change it to slide, refresh that. And again, if this were to fit some project you're on, like sliding from the left, that's all it does. But it loads the page and then transitions it. So what went from a simple CSS code for doing that, and you can get very complex, but the simplest one was that, just doing a little a fade transition to now a plugin that came out a couple weeks after that then has these other options set in where, it's slide, swipe, wipe, which tend to look pretty similar to each other, by the way. But I see maybe, this is just the first version of it that I would like to see timing, for example. I don't think he's got timing loaded in here yet to say, well, how fast do you want to have that happen, especially like the fade. But anyway, that's it. I'll put the links in. Yeah.
Kind of neat, especially like I said, depending on the site. If you have a site that, let's say, is maybe like product showcase or something like that, be kind of a cool effect, or recipes or something. So
maybe you have just a small site and you just want to give it a little bit more app-like feel to it, for example. I'm not one to throw effects for effects sake, but in some cases it's just like, oh, it just feels a little, I'm going to put in air quotes professional, because again, that having effects doesn't make you professional, but if it's appropriately applied, I thought this was a neat, simple way with this plugin to allow you to do that. So
there's a question, Peter, from Bob in the chat saying, does the plugin have good compatibility with different themes? I would I would guess it should because it's just CSS. It shouldn't be theme dependent, but
Yeah,
I guess
it's
it depends on the selectors though. That could be the one thing that depending on like if it's not selecting the right page.
right. Like if you've got a theme that totally overwrites things, you're going to have to go figure out,
Right.
you know, what it might be calling your featured image, you know, which is but by default WP post image. And I personally haven't come across
I will
any.
give,
They
I'm sorry,
add classes, but I don't see them getting rid of the core
the only
classes.
theme that, again, I don't use it that much anymore. The theme that really caused some problems with me for plugins like this was Divi, because Divi had so many like classes and everything. So simple plugins, like there was a banner plugin I've used on many, many sites that like all it does is puts a banner on the top of your page. But with
Yeah,
Divi, because Divi had all
yeah,
these different crazy classes, the banner wouldn't work. It would just like show up in the middle of a page or something. So yeah, I think it's one of those. I think Bobby, you have to test it out a bit and see.
yeah.
But yeah, hopefully if it's just CSS, it should work for the majority of sites. All right. Well, let's see. Like I said, I don't see Dina didn't join us. I don't. Maybe we could hold off on hers, Peter, because it'd
Okay.
be nice if she was here. She wanted us to look at a site, but I did see a couple questions pop up in the chat. Thank goodness we could go through. Some are very basic. We go through others. We get as deep as we like, and hopefully it sparks other questions too. So I'll start with Mary. Mary from Meriden. Great question about favorite themes and why. So Mary, if you're joining us maybe for the first time here, there's one that we yeah, there you go. Peter's actually
Yeah,
got a
it's
shirt.
backwards. I got to flip my camera, but that's yeah.
We're not sales promoters. This is not a sales promotion. So, so Mary, one thing that we use quite a bit. In fact, if you go back on our YouTube channel from probably a couple of years ago now, we built a site from scratch using it. It's the theme called Cadence, which Peter has the T-shirt promoting. But so Cadence, I'll show real quick because I have a site. I probably have a couple of sites that have both the free and the pro version. So cadence itself. So let me explain again why do we like it? That's a great question. Because again, it's one of those like there's no good answer to this because it probably depends a lot of people on what they're looking for, what type of site, et cetera, et cetera. But I think in terms of if you're a beginner, I think Cadence is a good choice because it comes with some things that I think are really um, make your life easier as a beginner, and it plays well with just regular WordPress. And there's a pro version with a lot of additional features which you may or may not need. In fact, the free version comes with quite a bit. I think that's one reason we really like it. So, as I said, the theme itself is here. It's Cadence. So if you search on, so how, again, if you're really, really new, how would you install this theme on a site? Again, do this on a test site of yours. If you want to add a new theme, you would have to go to, add theme. If you search for Cadence, Cadence has been around for at least 5, 6 years, maybe somewhere around there. So it's been around for a while, quite a lot of users, pretty active community supporting it. YouTube channel. So that's back to your thing of why we talked about this in previous presentations. You want to pick a theme that at least both meets your needs, has good support, is extensible, meaning you can use other things with it. Also, if you change your mind, it's something that isn't like completely destructive, meaning you could switch to another theme and all your layouts and things don't completely go away or look horrible. So, and Sue's got her dog. It's your dog named Cadence.
I don't think I've seen the dog yet. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Cadence is great. When it comes to what we call a classic theme, which is a theme that uses the customizer and doesn't use full site editing or the site editor, which is what is in a block theme. And I could talk about a couple of block themes that I might recommend. Not that I use them, but my list is short. There's three, which is Cadence, Generate Press, and Astra. In terms of and for similar reasons, they're really efficient themes. They take into account things like accessibility out of the box. Their developers pay attention to that. They do a lot with having the ability, especially then if you want to transition to the pro version. All three have a pro version where you get to a great level of control. You can have different headers on different pages if that was what you want. You get into a granular level of control as to what shows up on the page as you get better and better with it. And Cadence is again, the free version has an amazing amount of power built in, and then when you move to the pro, you can do just about anything. And then all three of them also have a block um, plugin where the blocks, which by the way, they don't have to work, like the Cadence blocks can work on an Astra site. The people get confused about that. And Generate Press can work on a Cadence site, but each one of them also have blocks that work within their own theme, work with other themes. But when you get into that kind of world, what's nice is then the people who are supporting it kind of are using both, and then you can find groups. Like there's a great Cadence user group. Generate Press I know has one. Astra I haven't used in a while. I have a lifetime license to Astra, and I like it. I just, one of the things you do is you end up focusing. You get better at something if you focus on it. So.
And I can, if you don't mind, Peter, Mary, I can literally give you, it's 6:35. I'll give a 5 minute, no more than 5 minute, quick overview of Cadence. So this is my demo site. And as Peter said, so this site right now, the theme it's actually using is the standard WordPress 20, an old one actually, WordPress 2021 theme. So, just from a styling standpoint, this is what my site looks like. Just it's a blog. So as Peter said too, Cadence, the thing that's a little bit confusing about Cadence is there's both a plugin for just Cadence blocks. So if you look under plugins, you can also find that there's Cadence blocks here. So Cadence blocks, you don't need to use the Cadence theme. You can use it on, like this is the WordPress 2021 theme. So why would I install the blocks? Because now in the WordPress, in any theme, basically, I can now use these blocks. So again, under the block inserter, all of these blocks are now available to me. These are the free blocks. I don't know, yeah, because I don't have the pro one turned on. So for example, one great block I'll show you here is like Google Maps, for example. So this is a block that does not come with WordPress core, but if you want to drop a map onto a page, there's icon blocks, there's counter blocks, there's the cool thing you can hover over them. So there's this huge package of blocks that you don't need to use the Cadence theme for that. You can just use these with almost any theme. I keep always saying almost because I'm sure there's one where it doesn't work. So the second part though is the actual theme. And so what's the difference? The theme is all the styling and additional stuff that you get beyond just what a plugin provides. So on this site, let me switch because I have Cadence installed already. When I activate the Cadence theme, one thing that happens immediately is if you just look at the site, it's going to look different. You can see right here, that looks a lot better in my eyes. It's sort of a loaded test here, but so this is a blog. So it already has made things look really nice. The formatting is different. There's a customizer in here. So if you go to the customizer, because I'm using Cadence, even without writing a single line of code in here, I can look and say, I want my archive. This is kind of the archive layout. How do I want it to look? Maybe I want to change things on it. Like maybe I want to have, instead of 3 columns, I want to have 2 columns. So just with a click of a button, I can do stuff here without touching any code. I can say, oh, maybe I don't want to show the author, so I can, or let's say that the category, I can hide the category. This is the theme. The theme is doing that kind of stuff for me. So that's one nice thing. In addition, real quick in the next 2 minutes here, of this also gives you some stuff that you don't get easily from a non-block based theme. One thing I really like about Cadence, even the free version, is the header and footer ability to change my headers and footers. So if I go to header layout, for example, this will be across my site. You get this really nice little drag and drop ability here. So let's say across my header, I have my logo. I can do stuff with my logo. Let's say I want to add a button to the middle of my header for some reason. Here we go. I can say, click me hashtag or something. So you have all of these little additional things you can drag and drop. I can have, social icons I can put for both header and footer. I can do things like change, make this a full width header. I can change the design. Let's say I want to make the color different. So I want to make it blue or whatever. This is all what that theme is providing for me. So it's giving me control across the site. And that's just the free version. I see Paul, you have your hand raised. And then the paid version, I have, I can show that maybe later. The paid version gives you even more in-depth kind of features beyond just the free version. But the free version itself, you get a ton of things like that. Paul, go ahead. You have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering. WordPress seems to be heading in the direction of the block theme and using full site editing.
Mhm.
Um, if that's the case, what's the rationale for us continuing to use, let's say, a 2021 theme, which is pre-block editing, and you have to use something like Cadence to be
Yep.
able to do the things that come default in the new block themes?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So it's kind of like I would say that the block theme itself, like full site editing, isn't quite there yet. So even like the whole Gutenberg block editor, it's gotten a lot better in the past few years. It's still, I would say, in some cases, not as good as some of these off-the-shelf blocks. Like you just saw, for example, that just with this theme or any other block package, I have access to many, there many more blocks, like feature, blocks that have certain features to them, for that Google Maps thing I showed, or even simple things like, advanced text here. It really gives me a lot more features that today's core Gutenberg blocks don't provide. Similarly, I would say full site editing, it's still not 100% baked in terms of allowing you to do things easily. And some of that maybe you don't need that level of granularity. So, for example, I mean, I was going to show it a little bit later, but just let me show you this site real quick. So, for example, if I really want to have a lot of control around what template shows, what page shows when I'm a page template when I'm doing something in WordPress, the current WordPress full site editor still doesn't give me, this is the pro version of Cadence right now, it doesn't give me this level of granularity yet. So this, for example, I'm applying this archive template to a certain page, and if you look at the level of granularity it gives me, it's saying, well, when do I want to apply this? So I want to apply this for, these post types. This is a special custom post type, and I want to apply it at a certain level. So I want to replace my archive loop. I want to display it on these types of things. I can exclude it, hide it on certain things. I can add new rules. I can say, well, for certain users, it's like all of that level of detail. If you don't need that, then yeah, perhaps like a regular full site editing theme will suffice. But I think for a lot of people, once you start getting into things like templates and all that, I think you'll find that at least the free full site editing themes that come with WordPress these days, like the 2025 theme, etc. To me, they don't cut it. If you're getting to that point, I think you're probably better off, using something like, a paid version of, Cadence to do that. Peter, you got any thoughts on that?
I do. This is a big topic with me, and also I'll try to keep it really, really short. Which is, yes, it is considered and WordPress core team and all. This is what they focus on whenever there's a new release. But the fact is, one, 95% of all WordPress sites, 90%, I don't know what the exact number is. I once did a count on it, are still classic themes, right? So the support for classic themes is absolutely vital. And that small percentage that are adopting um, the block themes and full site editing are running into some of the challenges of a product that's being kind of developed as we use it, which is part of WordPress in the first place, quite honestly. But um, it is I'm being brutally honest. It can be very frustrating using full site editing, and you think you've learned something, and then a new release comes out and they change how the interface works, or it's just, those who are using it are saying, "Oh, this is so intuitive how you do it," and you go use it and go, "It is not intuitive." It is if you're an expert because you've trained yourself, just like any tool, by the way. They can't use a cadence because they haven't used a cadence, and to me, it's by far the easiest. But that said, I wouldn't fear especially if, and there's one thing that it's very, very important to consider when you're thinking about WordPress and building things in WordPress. If you are building in a classic theme, your edit area is going to work in a block theme anyway. So if you get to a point to transition, that content area between the header and the footer is, for the most part, and yes, there's always exceptions, and there's always things that can be done on a theme level will mess stuff up, and then there's certain types of themes that really take WordPress in a whole different direction. Put those aside, but for the most part, if what you're working on in that edit area, now you want to transition to a block theme because it's become more solid, or because there's a block theme that does what you want, and you really want to get into, I want a certain control a certain way, and it really appeals to me the way that interface works. Your content's still going to work, right? And that's the beauty of WordPress. It's not like you gotta, start from absolute scratch. You can apply a block theme to it. And by the way, which block themes would I look at right now? I would look at Ollie, and I look at variations, and there is a Nev full site editing theme, and a Raft. I think those are kind of the four that I've looked at that have appealed to me most from a well-supported, easy to use, so on. And I can pull those up if you want. But whenever I go into full site editing right now, I just keep going, and so the learning curve and the things that I can't do don't outweigh the fact that this is, quote, air quote, the future. So
and it will throw into, again, we can move on to the next question after this, but I will also throw in the thing that kind of deflated my enthusiasm for the full site editing is just some of the stuff that's been happening in the WordPress ecosystem the past year, where I think this has stalled a bit. I think with what was formerly called Gutenberg block editor, I think we were seeing a good pace of this is getting better, it's getting better, it's getting better. In many ways, that's what caused me to stop using a page builder like Divi, because I said, wait a minute, I can do what I need to do now just with core blocks or maybe some other block package. This thing to me still feels half baked. It's gone better. This when I say this thing, I mean this is, if people haven't seen this is a full site editing theme. So I switched to the 2025 theme. So all the things I was showing you in Divi, for example, I'm sorry, the thing I was showing you in Cadence, like if I want to change, if I wanted to change, let's say the header or footer, well, here I've got to find my template for that, or it's not intuitive yet. It's like clicking a button, you get there. I'm still drilling multiple levels deep. It's improving, and it's supposed to improve, but I'm a little fearful that it's stalled a bit, and other companies are moving on. And like that's it happened with blocks too. It's like by the time Gutenberg caught up, or WordPress caught up, it took years. Now we're at a place where those blocks, I can safely say, a block editor, I'm comfortable recommending to use, and don't use a page builder if you don't need to. Full site editing, call me in 2 years. We'll see.
100% in the block editor. And I'm going to throw in one more thing that's pretty timely. So I mentioned the Ollie block theme, developed by, I forget the name of the team, but the face of them is a guy named Mike McAllister. Great guy, really smart. Great product. He just came out with a YouTube video talking about using WordPress as a design base, and talking about how the Ollie tool allows you to have this great kind of control over your design, so you have universal design and stuff. But what was bothering me in his presentation with this was creating the false dichotomy that says the only way you can do that in WordPress without a theme like the Ollie theme is to do a whole lot of coding and CSS and stuff like that. And it's like, if you want to not use code, you go, and that's a false dichotomy because of things like the Cadence theme, which you have tremendous control over. And when you get to the premium, if you want to have, you have kind of global settings. Same thing with the other two I mentioned, Astra and Generate Press and all. So there's a lot of input of says what's best and what doesn't work. And some of the things that I hear in terms of like, oh, you can't do that. And it's like, you sure as heck can. Maybe you don't know how, or you haven't bothered to try some of these other tools, but that's where paying attention, you going to the meetups, asking about something specific, we don't mean to steer you as much as inform you. So you could say, Ollie's a fantastic theme. I wouldn't not recommend it, but it is a block theme using full site editor and all of that. And once you get into that world, you're leaving a lot of, you're in you're in that version of WordPress. You're not in classic WordPress using the customizers and things like that. So
I'll jump to another question. I'm just going the order that they came in. So Zeta from Manchester asked a question about getting familiar with the basics of WordPress and SEO. And that's a big topic, Zeta, but it's a good one. So if you go back to our previous videos on YouTube, we've covered SEO several times, but I'll give the quick, again, this might be a good lightning round thing. That's what you call this, Peter, lightning round of I'll give you the quick overview of SEO in general. And again, it's changing a lot. SEO is a funny topic that these days, because of AI and stuff, things are changing rapidly. But just in general terms, and I had a presentation a while back. If I can find it as I'm talking, I'll bring it up. But in general, you want to think of SEO. There's kind of two what do you want to call it? Two sides to SEO. It's not the right word. There's two dimensions, I guess, to SEO. One is what we call like on page and off page. So on page SEO are the things that you can do on your website to basically make your website structured in a real basic sense. Make your website structured. Structured for whom? For people? Kind of. Yeah, that's part of it. But also structured for search engines, which in the past used to be Google and scrapers and spiders, we used to call them, and Bing and all those things. Things are changing a lot now because of AI. So let's leave that off the table just for now. But that's on page. It's all the things you can do to make sure your site is structured. And we'll talk about how you can do that with WordPress. And then briefly, the second part of SEO is what they call off-page SEO. Off-page SEO are primarily things that in most cases you don't have a lot of control over. Things like links, backlinks to your site. So let's say, for example, you're so lucky or unlucky that your website gets brought up by the New York Times, and it's on the front page of the virtual New York Times. You know what I mean? It's like suddenly thousands of views and people are coming to you. That's an off-page SEO thing. You didn't do anything, but somebody linked to you. There's other off-page things that you can sort of control, like your Google business profile. So again, if you're running a business, a small business or whatever, you can claim your business profile through Google and fill in a bunch of information like what hours is my business open, blah, 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 and then put your website as a link to that. That's SEO. That's off-page SEO. And there's other stuff you can do. There's other factors. Some of it's mystery that Google doesn't want to tell you, like how old your site is. If you have malware on your site, that's another kind of off-page-ish thing that can really affect your site. So anyway, to the on-page part, back to WordPress. WordPress by itself is SEO friendly, meaning if you just use core WordPress and in the free WordPress 2025 theme that I showed, it has the building blocks for SEO. But in most cases, I'd say most people who build a site and are even thinking of SEO are probably going to use an SEO plugin. And we have, like I said, probably not too long ago, a couple of months ago or so, Peter and I think, did a face-off between a couple of plugins. It wasn't, they're both good. The answer was they were both good. They were both free. They had some free versions of them. So I would highly recommend you, if you want to have more detail, you can go back and look at that. But just to show you real briefly on one of these sites, I think I have one of these demo sites. It might have been this one. What does an SEO plugin do for you? It basically gives you more control of that on-page stuff. Oh, here we go. So good. This one is one of demo sites. It has this plugin is the one I think that I was showing. Peter showed another one. So again, if you're interested, go back to look at those two. But this is SEO Press. There's a free, just like all these plugins, free version and a paid version. In this case, the free version of SEO Press is probably more than what you need to begin with. So once you install it, what happens? What it does is, there's a whole bunch of settings, a configuration wizard you can walk through. I think we do that in that recording you can watch. But for the most part, what it really does is it adds these kind of meta boxes to your pages and posts. So for example, let's say here's my home page. This one's probably just kind of not much in here. Yeah, but here, what it did was at the bottom of this page, this stuff is what the plugin has given to me. I'm sorry, this stuff, the SEO things, what the plugin has added. So what can I do here? What I can do is I can control certain on-page data that isn't visible to a person, a visitor to my site necessarily, but it's data that's used by those crawlers. It's used by the search engines. So for example, here I can say, here's what I want my home page, raise business, whatever. So this is what this little snippet thing. The cool thing too about this SEO plugin is this will show what this will look like when somebody's searching for my site. Theoretically, there's many factors that it may not show like this if I'm low in search results, etc. But it's kind of showing that this is what my search results will look like for my site, and these are things that I'm controlling. I am controlling this. But what's cool too is it has all these rules. Like there's a bunch of SEO rules. Some of them, to be honest, I'm not even sure really apply much anymore. But they're kind of, I don't know. People seem to think they still do. It'll tell you like don't put in more than 160 characters, and it's counting for you. So it'll help you keep your site structured pretty well. You can do additional things here, like you could run some content analysis to say, hey, let's say I'm looking to write an article about cats, whatever. You could put this in as a keyword, and you could run some tests against it to say how often am I using the word cat in this article? Am I using it enough? You don't want to overstuff things, etc. So there's those kind of tools that can help you evaluate your content, make sure that things are structured properly. Here's something going back to from a user standpoint. You're not really supposed to use it just for SEO, but back to user experience. Peter's our expert in accessibility. You want to make sure that you're putting in alt tags, things like that are both good for people, people who may be using a screen reader, but also data that could be valuable to SEO, like SEO engines. So again, that's it kind of in a nutshell. There's a lot more behind that. And again, AI wild card in here. So I don't know, Peter, anything else to throw in?
Yeah. So first, yeah, AI is the wild card here because I am as guilty as anybody where, and I honestly don't understand at this point with Google, for example, where it's giving me the AI response and I get everything I need in those first two paragraphs. So I don't even need to look at their ads, never mind. So, and the money making thing, it's a little very weird, but SEO itself is still got value. It is definitely changing, but I'll tell you the best thing is the advice I've been giving for forever, which never relied on tricks, black hat techniques, the things that you do to try to trick the search engines to find you. It's one, write really good content. As simple as that seems. It needs to be comprehensive enough, answering questions, that type of thing. But then when you get into what some of the tools help you with and all, especially one of the best things you can do for SEO is pay attention to accessibility. So having well formatted, using headers properly, making sure that anything that's going to help somebody use a screen reader is going to help a computer read your content. That proper semantic markup, having your descriptions and all as you're showing. I put the two links in, Ray, for SEO Press and Slim and Slim SEO that help you with those types of things. Sure, Yoast is the most popular by far. Rank Math, all of these. For me, overkill like crazy, especially when it's trying to tell me exactly how to write content, which I just find annoying. But it's kind of, the absolutely oversimplified way of looking at it is just, write good content and present it correctly. Then you get into things like, is your site running fast enough, right? Maybe you have a server issue, or for example, we'll probably catch it next week when we do, or next month if we do the review of the site that we were going to do tonight, for example. When the site runs really slow because it's got gigantic images in the wrong places and things like that, that's where you're going to fall down the rankings because Google's going to say nobody's going to wait for your site to come up, so I'm not going to rank you high, that type of thing. So again, that's just make an efficient, useful site. If it's useful for a person, it's useful for a search engine to find you.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I know Scherz, if I'm pronouncing this incorrectly, Scherza
Mhm.
wanted to get familiar with WordPress. I just want to kind of pass on two um, pieces of information that I found very helpful during my initial study of WordPress. One is from a woman who's actually a professor, I believe at a community college out in California. I took one of her courses on HTML and CSS on LinkedIn Learning, and she has a YouTube channel. Her name's Emily Kay. She's an excellent teacher. Her explanations are just phenomenal. I mean, she can really explain. Like I said, I took her HTML, CSS course. She has a YouTube channel. It's called Virtual Addiction, and she recently did a series on WordPress. So if I might, if it's all right, I'd like to put that in the chat.
Yeah,
Maybe
please do,
shares
Paul.
it. Okay.
Absolutely.
And the second one is a book that I found, um, WordPress for Beginners, um,
Okay.
by Andy Williams. He's a former school teacher. Really great. Takes you step by step, with excellent explanations, and illustrations, and it takes you through the basics of WordPress from soup to nuts. So if it's okay, I'd like to put those two.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you brought that up, Paul, too, because again, there's different learning styles. And I will say that when I first was learning WordPress many years ago, there were a lot more books available. Sadly, these days, there's not that
Yeah.
many. You can see I got a ton of technical books behind me. I got rid of tons of them because unfortunately some of them were just out of date and you find the stuff online better. But for me, that's still the kind of learner that I am. I prefer something structured and like building a project and all that. So that's
Yeah.
yeah, depending on your style of learning, there's definitely and then I'd be remiss if I didn't plug learn.wordpress.org. Again, a lot of
Yep.
great materials there. Some of the folks on that team join our meetups on occasion too. So there's tons of stuff, yeah, to learn. So no, yeah, definitely, Paul, put those resources in there.
And I think we mentioned it may have been part of our tips and tricks kind of jamboree or something where the whole being aware of when you go to YouTube and do a search, how you can immediately either go down a rabbit hole or go down a very specific path depending on who you land, or find something that is so different from what you're using but it's being presented as WordPress without enough clarification of what theme, what page builder, those types of things. If you start going into the world of bricks, or if you go into the world of Elementor or the world of Divi, these are all different experiences, and it can get really, really confusing. And there are people who come up very, at the top of the list if you have a simple, like WordPress tutorial that you could almost immediately take the wrong first step. So it's hard to know what to do in that case other than ask here. For example, we could say, yeah, if you want to go learn Elementor, that's a good resource, and here's what Elementor is and why you might do it. I'm going to show a book. It's really funny. I had to check the copyright of this, and I know it's backwards on my screen. I have to turn around. It's called Don't
That's
Make Me
good.
Think.
Yeah, I had that with Steve Krug's. Yeah.
Yeah, Don't Make Me Think was a very popular book 25 years ago,
Yeah.
but the concepts of Don't Make Me Think still apply, which is literally don't do things to confuse people around your site. Keep it as straightforward and simple as possible, and that applies to SEO,
Yeah.
and that applies to site speed and all of those things.
So yeah, design is its own whole separate thing too.
Yeah.
You're right, user design, and there's whole experts in that. I will show just real quick too before we drop the SEO thing. Just back to Peter's point about creating good content. And again, this is probably worth it more for next month about just back to AI, for example. I think we showed this before, but yeah, I kind of use this example. This is a site that I built in support for this Polish genealogy group here. And one of our number one blog posts that gets it's usually our top post every month is this, beginner's guide to Polish genealogy. And, again, written by this professor who basically wrote many books on Polish genealogy, tons of resources. I mean, this article has been around for years and years. We keep adding stuff to it, and yeah, that's his book. So a good resource always shows up as high links. So if you search, let's say, for example, in Perplexity AI and say, I put my question, I'm a beginner interested in learning about getting started with Polish genealogy. How should I begin? The good thing, I will give credit. Perplexity does show you, at least like when I first did this, it does show you the sources that it's using. And one of those sources is, it's in here somewhere. That article is in there. It is. I saw it. It was there. It is. It's one of these in here. But I think the fear that people have, rightly so, with AI is how many people are actually going to go back to the source. So what it did was it went to 50 sites, or in this case, 17 websites that are like that page I showed you, those authoritative, pieces of information that Peter said, which I think is still good advice, write good content. Everyone's fear, though, is you've written that good content, you spent a lot of time on it, and this engine, this AI thing, scraped it all, threw it together, summarized it, and this is what you end up with. So this does not, does a person stop here? And I think that's what remains to be seen as we look at SEO in the future of, what does this mean? Most people, are they going to just get this information, say, thank you very much, I got my answer, and move on? Or are they ever going to go to your site and look at your site? So, you know, it depends on what your site is. If your site's a business site versus an informational site, that's the challenge. If you're trying to make money or advertising on your site, everyone's really afraid of that right now. It's like, are clicks drying up, And if you're really relying on that type of model of driving traffic, I think across the board, people have been seeing it. I'm not the SEO expert, but as traffic to many large sites across the board has been going down, and a lot of it, I think, is attributed to this. Paul, go
Yeah.
ahead again.
Now, when it comes to site ranking, I'm sure you've noticed that on Google, when you do a search, right up at the top, you get a summary from Gemini.
Yep.
Under that, you get the links that the companies have paid for their
Yep.
ranking.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter what you do for your client as far as SEO is concerned, they still may end up on page 2, 3, or 4.
Yeah, and then Sue's point too, Reddit, because Reddit made a big deal with Google, especially for their Gemini search results. You get that now as another piece. I used to have a slide, again, it's probably in the old presentation prior to AI, where even that, I forget what they called it. It was like it's kind of like thinking about a newspaper, above the fold and below the fold kind of concept there. It used to be that the real estate that you would get for search results would be, like you said, the paid ones would come up first. Those used to be like
Yep.
the first three, and then something else below it. And then if you're lucky, you'd be in that next pile. That size of the screen now has shrunk more and more. Like I said, the Gemini thing is top paid stuff. You're lucky now if you're still even anywhere near the corner of the fold. Sue, go ahead. You got your hand.
Couldn't find the audio thing. My daughter's an SEO person, and I have asked her these questions.
Yeah.
You're not going to come up at the top because, first of all, what Gemini's given me at the top is exactly what I need in 70% of the cases.
Yeah.
One of the ways you can help raise your rankings, and Ray talked about backlinks, get a Reddit account. Reddit is not a bad place. Get a Reddit account and go answer some questions and link to your website. In your answer, I did it like a year ago. I answered a web question and I asked the question and my answer came up on the top. So Reddit, you can find a Reddit group that's interested in any topic on the planet.
Yeah.
Just type in a noun that you like. I'm a member of New York Times Crossword Puzzles Reddit and WordPress and a couple of other things. So it is something you can do.
Yeah.
We did a site years ago for a company that sells gift wrap. They're a local company in my town, and they're the kind of people that the kids from school go around selling to raise money and things. Anyway, We did their SEO for 3, 4, 6 months, and we were moving up until Martha Stewart did a show on wrapping Christmas presents, featured their stuff, and linked to it. We were done. We didn't have to do any more SEO work on that site for years. They were overwhelmed with orders. So backlinks, the way you get a backlink is by going to somebody's site and writing a post there because people are hungry for content. And
Yeah.
if you write a post, then they're going to let you link back. SEO on when you're not paying for it, when you're doing it yourself, is hard work.
Hmm.
You have to write articles, you have to go to, and Google, when you go to Google, chances are you ask a question. Google has extra points if your FAQs are set up as questions. And then your answer quotes the question. So, how do I do this in WordPress when you name the thing?
Mhm.
And then you say, to do this in WordPress, this thing, here's what you do. Step 1, 2, 3. They're listicles that
Right.
bullet out or number out your steps. That's the I tend to live in the weeds. I know that we've been talking in the treetops, but
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time in the weeds. And these are small things you can do if you're going to write a blog post anyway, and you should, because my daughter says that's what makes your site fresh and it gets noticed. Ask questions, answer them with the question in the answer. Don't make them too long and make them very specific. And then
Yeah.
go to Reddit, find that question, and answer it there. It's otherwise you're competing against Gemini.
And I will say
And
though, the thing I totally agree, Sue. I think what you're saying is definitely true. I will say though, again, having watched, and I'm sure many here have watched too, SEO changes constantly. So a lot of Sue's advice, I think it's completely accurate at this point in time. Like
not tomorrow,
The
not
Reddit thing
tomorrow.
is going to become another one of these. It went back years ago where people would create a bunch of articles and suddenly before search engines got smart and weeded out things and they wait a minute, these are kind of mass produced. Right now, Reddit is sort of enjoying this kind of period of being a king where it's used for AI. I think over time, a lot of people are learning that trick to say, let me put a bunch of stuff in here, and if it passes through, it seems to jump to the top. I think that's going to be gone
It just
in a
depends.
while.
A lot of it depends on the question. Just
Yeah,
like when you use AI, everything depends on the prompt.
right.
And there are actually people writing books about how to write
Yeah,
prompts.
although I've read stuff too of even that idea of prompt engineering it may not be the skill that we think it is. It's where we are today. I think in a couple of years from now, things are getting better and smarter to interpret. Just like think about the search engine again. We'll go off on a tangent real quick, but like for many of us who used, Google years ago and other search engines, you had to be pretty precise back in the day to get good results. These days, it's smart. You can misspell, you can put, words sort of jumbled together. It knows what you're asking because it has so much knowledge and history behind it. AI is like that times
Well,
10.
that's why she suggests blog posts and Reddit things because they're getting sucked into AI
Yeah,
and it's there. And if somebody asks the right question, and we kind of call that long tail keywords,
yeah.
like
Yeah.
I do a lot of ebook publishing and editing. And when when I start to, okay, when I start looking for keywords, I will admit I paid her tuition, I get the benefit. I call my daughter and I say, give me keywords because she's got all the pro tools. Give
Sure.
me keywords. And the keywords for this blog post, and I'll give her like, here's 2 paragraphs, and she'll send me an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, I have that privilege. But what I found out about keywords is that if you look at my site and I look at how many hits I get on particular articles, the title of the post matters.
Oh yeah.
So if you've got the 5 best whatever, 6 words to avoid when you're doing something. So the most hit post on my site is how to start 5 ways to start a podcast for free. I mean, it's just up there. And then there's 10 words to avoid in your book title. Mr. Google likes numbers, not the best tool, the 3 best tools to do this particular thing. And they're
your
called
title
long,
is almost like what somebody would query too. So that's a good point of matching your
and it's
title
a
to
long
like,
tail keyword.
yeah.
If you know what the bell curve is, these are the keywords everybody's paying for. The ones that are out here on the curve are called the long tail keywords. And if you're in a particular field, then use them. I'll be quiet now.
Let's
Thank you.
jump from
Thank you.
SEO. I think we can easily spend the rest of the night. Yeah. We'll jump back.
Well,
The whole
I'm
summer.
going to throw in one
Go
more
real
thing
quick, Peter. Go ahead.
that has a lot to do with. Oh, an eagle's waiting to come in now. If you want
Yeah,
to,
let him in. I got him.
that there's what's the intention of the website in the first place, right? In other words, there's a percentage of the people here who don't really, they're not worrying about search engine optimization. They're a tool for a smaller community. They are a area for self-expression. They are a business tool where it might be, I have all these ways of communicating people, and now I have my home-based website, which is where my portfolio is going to be and where my contact and things like that. So there's that whole approach of like, well, what's your website for in the first place? Are you trying to generate tons of traffic, or are you trying to reach the people you're trying to reach? That also being said is in a lot of cases, the ones that are going to rise to the top in a lot of ways end up being those sites if you want to reach a broader audience for whatever reason. Again, like the genealogy site, I don't know if you're making money doing it. You're providing it as a service and as an information for other people who are interested in it because you're all passionate about the topic.
Yeah. That's
how
true. It's like the business, the business site. It's like I want people to visit my brick and mortar store. Do I care if you get my phone number from my website or from Google? I don't care. Come to my store.
Exactly. And that's why local SEO is its own kind of very, very important topic. And if you have a business or if you have, a certain market that you want to reach and you want to make sure that you're doing the Google business and you're getting on the map and you take ownership of your business, that's that whole topic. So there's a lot of different approaches to things like that. But yeah, and then the last point being, in a lot of cases, I think the ones that rise to the top and get the bigger audiences, if that's what you want in terms of like individuals and smaller groups, are those who communicate authentically and those who have an insight that is beyond an AI aggregation of all of the stuff out there so we can give you step 1, 2, and 3. That idea of somebody like, well, give me the steps I need to take to plant my potatoes properly and hill them. Do I cover the leaves or not? Something I just looked up. The AI answers all I needed, right? And yes, I had the links and stuff like that, but I just was confirming what I wanted to know. That kind of listicle instructional thing. Yeah, there's a lot of sources for that, and AI is just going to bring it all together and say, here's the answer, and here's the sources. And yes, Perplexity, definitely a pro Perplexity.
At least it tells you its sources. At least you can check its homework.
Exactly. All right, what else you got?
All right, I'm going to jump to Shirza's question. So Shirza is asking about looking to learn new themes for WordPress for e-commerce. So Shirza, I would assume that most likely, especially when people talk about e-commerce and WordPress, most people are referring to like WooCommerce. So, WooCommerce is its own whole separate, I think we covered that once long ago. WooCommerce is a plugin that allows you to do e-commerce through your WordPress site. It's free in the sense there are actually quite a bit you can do with WooCommerce, again, just by itself. And in fact, you don't specifically need any particular theme just to use WooCommerce. Having said that, most people, I do think, find that there are themes or ways to make WooCommerce look better, and that's primarily what the themes are doing. They're not really changing the behavior of WooCommerce. Like, so for example, I don't have a demo site now that I can show you that has WooCommerce on it. I'm not sure if you can find one, Peter, but WooCommerce, just like any e-commerce site, and it's not just this, let me step back. One of the challenges, a lot of people think e-commerce is easy. It's not. It's its own headache. It's if you're shipping physical products, it's like, did you weigh them? Where are you shipping to? What are your shipping costs? What's your inventory tracking? Blah, all these kind of things, like any business. So WooCommerce is just that inside of a website. So it allows you to do things like create products and images and descriptions and prices and all that kind of stuff. So that's what the WooCommerce plugin does. There's a whole bunch of stuff just around managing products, inventories, and then WooCommerce has its own set of extensions for things like, let's say you want to ship by UPS or FedEx or DHL or whatever. All that stuff is all the WooCommerce ecosystem. There's entire YouTube channels and Facebook groups all devoted to WooCommerce because that's its own thing. Meanwhile, back to that was a long summary. Meanwhile, in terms of themes themselves, again, just sticking with Cadence, I wouldn't say this is necessarily the best one. I personally don't have any experience using Cadence for WooCommerce. Actually, that's where I used Divi back in the past. But what a theme will provide for you, and I think this is inside the Cadence Pro version,
Yep.
it does give you additional, again, this is under products, Cadence, they call it their shop kit. What this will give you is better styling of that data in WooCommerce. So for example, like it kind of tells you this right here, it's taking all that data that's just stored in the plugin. WooCommerce does come with its own like generic templates for this kind of stuff. So to look at a product summary or look at a product description, but this allows you to do some fancier stuff to make your site look better, to make your site look more like Amazon or any shopping site you've gone to. So, like again, here's some great things that this theme gives you, like variation. So, show me what it looks like in small, medium, large, and it'll have like a little gallery that lets you change views, etc. Gather reviews. So these are all the things that the theme is providing on top of the WooCommerce data. So it really comes down to what you're trying to do, kind of how you're trying to showcase your products, how much control you want to have. So I'm just mentioning the Cadence one, but I'd love to hear from others here of themes that anyone wants to call out that you've worked with that really do a good job of working with WooCommerce. Anyone, Peter, anyone else has?
Not that I mean, I had made the suggestion earlier on that again, the top three in terms of classic themes work fine with WooCommerce, Astra, Generate Press, Cadence, and yeah, there are block packages that can work with those, right? So there are specific plugins that go beyond control of the way WooCommerce presents product and all, and then all of those enhancements that you said that might get into things like the shipping and things like that. It's a huge, because I've worked with a couple of WooCommerce sites. I have one now that I primarily work. It's using Astra as the theme, and I'm going to move it away from it, but it's been built in the Beaver Builder page builder, and we can talk briefly about page builders. There was a question about a little bit more about Elementor. But yeah, depending on what block packages or what, if you're using Elementor or page builder that has some level of integration that recognizes the way WooCommerce stores product and interacts with things like the cart, your shopping cart and all, then you can get into all kinds of layout controls. And there's so many ways of modifying it. And the thing to keep in mind is in WooCommerce, a product is a very specialized custom post type, right? It is, that's the word you would hear a lot in WordPress, where it is just another thing that goes in the database. So here's the title, here's the description, here's the image, but then here's the price, here's maybe an inventory number, and all of those types of things that are part of the WooCommerce record for things. And now on the front end, you're saying, well, how do I show those? How do I make them searchable? Do I put them in a carousel? And again, you're multi-purposing all of these records of your product in a lot of different ways. And these block packages, the shop kit, you said from Cadence, for example.
Yeah. And this is Astra's, their templates too.
Yeah, exactly. They use they use those elements in different ways to present WooCommerce products a different way. Yeah, Beaver Builder. There are add-ins to that page builder that specifically look at WooCommerce products and say, "Oh, you want to? We have our version of the carousel," or then you get into the things that say, "Well, the WooCommerce checkout works a certain way, but here's a plugin that now steps you through the checkout a different way. It's gathering that information a different way."
I
It's
will,
vast.
yeah, I was gonna say what the thing that gets confusing very quickly with e-commerce sites. There's many things that get confusing, but especially now when you're talking about like so WooCommerce itself is a plugin, and then now you have a theme that's applying some styling and things to that. So where it gets a little confusing is at the end, if you're trying to troubleshoot something, you're like, where is this? Is this in my theme that's doing this? Is it in the plugin that's doing this? Is it just the way I set it up the data? So I think that's in some ways I'd almost caution you to like find the simplest solution to what you want. And then as you get more comfortable, especially if you're new to e-commerce, I hate to even say it to many people, but try Shopify. If you're just starting off a business, try Shopify. I know it's this is a WordPress meetup, but Shopify or something like that, or even Squarespace. They're all in one solutions. I had a client or not a client. Somebody reached out to me a while back for an e-commerce business, and I was like, this is just a headache because they were just proving a proof of concept thing. Like, do you really want to set up a word, or even pay me to set up a WordPress site with WooCommerce and all this? Like, just try it on something simpler. Try Shopify. See if you can make a single sale before you invest in this big back end system. So again, I think it looked like Astra had some templates. Against Cadence had some. So I'd say those are probably good ones to start with. To be honest, those stick with just maybe those two to begin with and see if they don't meet your needs. Then look for others. What I would not do, we talked about this many times before. I wouldn't absolutely. We got to think all agree here. I would not go to a place like. Is it even still around? Is ThemeForest still around?
Oh yeah, don't go to Theme Forest.
Don't go to one of these places. Nothing against ThemeForest. If anyone on here from them, or if you support a site, don't go to one of these gigantic marketplaces and say, "Oh, I found a great e-commerce template," because I will bet you this is something that is like no one's heard of. You're going to come onto a support forum like this or someplace else and say, "Hey, I'm using the Phono theme," or whatever this is. Everyone's saying, "What the heck are you talking about?" So stick with something that's like a well-known theme that isn't hyper specific. That's the problem with these things. Some of these are like, and some of these, to be honest, are also they look great in the pictures, but when you try to use them, they're just kind of a nightmare because they don't have the regular tools that some of these other like Astra or Cadence have. They don't have the kind of the regular theme tools that those themes provide. So
And one more thing, and keep in mind,
yeah.
as I was mentioning before about when you have page content, post content, you're in a classic theme, and you're looking at the edit area, that content area, and the header footer are separate, so you can move to a block theme. It's the same thing for a WooCommerce too. In other words, WooCommerce is basically outputting in a certain area, and you can output it, again, in carousels and things like that. But that's all page content for the most part. So again, this idea of what the theme can do, it really actually gets more into, does the theme specifically try to help you with the style of things like the checkout section and all, because it knows what those styles are, or is it something like a block package that now has greater features, and that's in the plugin world more than it is the theme world. But I absolutely agree, keeping it simple, trying WooCommerce out of the box on Cadence, Astra, Generate, Press, and see what it looks like. It might be exactly what you want, and all of the other stuff is just a distraction.
I see Mary has another question and another hot button question. Elementor, what do we think about
Yeah.
Elementor? Um, and we talked about page builders a bit in the past too. And to back up a little bit, page builders served a great purpose at a certain time, and especially as we talked about like WordPress blocks. And some people may disagree that WordPress block editor isn't what they they think it should be or what they need, that's fine. I'd say for the vast majority of beginner, do-it-yourselfers, just using the core blocks that come in WordPress are more than enough. They've gotten so much better now in terms of layout, and we showed many things. Go back to some of our previous meetups. Even if you don't think you're a design expert, there's so many places you can go to now of getting patterns and things like that to make your site look great. And even Cadence, for example, the free version, I believe, does come with a bunch of starter templates and things like that. So there's tons of stuff you can do just to make your site look good. These page builder tools, in the past, they served that purpose, I think, of allowing you to have a drag and drop interface for building something, for building a website. Because it used to not be easy with WordPress. I don't even have an old site anymore with the classic editor. So for people who are only familiar with where's my site? There it is. Oh, no, it's not. Where did my site go? If you're fairly new to WordPress, and if this is the only user interface that you've seen, you may say, well, what's the big deal? This looks okay. I get it. It's a blank page, but I got blocks to drop and everything like that. That's, what's the problem? Well, in the past, WordPress used to look like, I don't know if I have it. Let me try. I'll show you what it used to look. Here's the time machine. If you look for the classic editor, I can install it because 10 million people are still using it. They just don't want to give up. But this is what WordPress used to look like. So if I go to a page, for example, and add a page, I think it'll work like that. It was this. Okay. Wait a minute. How do I create a page? How do I create this? Let me look at this thing. How do I create this beautiful, that view? How do I create that in this? Where do I even begin? So that's where page builders like Beaver Builder, Elementor, Divi, and many others, Visual Composer, what they really provided was the ability to create things like sections and rows. I mean, that's all this is. This is like a big section and a row and positioning elements. So I position this in the middle and styling, all that kind of stuff. In the past, you needed a page builder to do that. You absolutely did, unless you were really good at CSS, HTML, kind of a developer. So what the block editor, also kind of known as Gutenberg, what that really did is that provided mostly a tool that I think people can use to achieve layouts that you needed a page builder for in the past. And just to prove that, so now, for example, even if you're not an expert in how to lay out a page, you can see I think this is the core. Yeah, I'm back to WordPress, the 2025 theme, I think. So let's say I want to create just a landing page that looks like this. I mean, I click on that, and here it gives me a starting point. So depending on what theme you use, like Cadence, et cetera, and what is this? If you look on the left-hand side, this page is really made up of sections. There's a cover section, there's a group, et cetera. So to me, this method of doing a layout is much more intuitive now than what a page builder looks like. I think the only page builder site I have is probably my site. Sorry. Yeah. Again.
Well, while you're doing that, I will say, like, I used Beaver Builder for years, and I've got a couple of sites left on Beaver Builder, and when I go back to use those sites, it feels like it's far too much work and confusing to do what I can do in the block editor. Now, granted, a lot of that has to do with practice.
Yeah.
100%. The people who are 100% into Elementor and have been using it for years and years and years and say, when I go to the block editor, I don't know what's going on. It's because they're not as experienced. They're not as practiced. I get that. But if you're kind of new coming on and stuff like that, to immediately go down the page builder, I think you're already putting yourself down, a path where you have to have another layer of expertise, and you've kind of made a choice, whereas so much is the block editor. And the other thing, and we can come back to this too, but Ray, you mentioned patterns, and I would say one of the best things that you can do, especially as a new user, somebody who's really wanting to develop more design skills and all, is really understand block patterns and finding sources for block patterns and using block patterns and deconstructing block patterns and pulling block patterns together. And you realize, a block pattern, which is just a bunch of blocks arranged a certain way that gives you a look. That's what I want. Let me put that here and let me put this here and let me, or let me modify it now that I put in there. That is going to get you so much further, I think, than almost anything else, is to really understand block patterns, how they work, where you can get them, things like that.
I think the big thing too that you lose now from a page builder is you lose that ability, that extensibility, which is one of the reasons we all want, or kind of champion WordPress to begin with. When I say extensibility, what I mean is, I think we showed you earlier when we first started this meetup that this site right now is this one I think is running. I switched back to the 2025 theme. I can still have my cadence blocks on here. I can have Astra blocks. I can have let's say there's a specific block pattern of, paid or free, that I need a particular block for something. I can use them all on this in this, block editor kind of world. In a page builder world, you can't. I mean, you can use plugins, and some plugins play better with some themes than others. But in this case here, if you look at these modules, like if I, here's Divi, this is what I have. This is it. Unless I have a plugin that's like, there used to be companies, they're still around, some of them that would create Divi plugins or Divi modules. That, to be honest, that's a dying business. Just like Elementor too. I mean, I'm sure they're doing great, but man, to me, that's like you've tied yourself so much to another vendor. Do you really want to do that? So that's one of the things. I think you get limited choice from using a page builder. And to be honest too, well, Divi is coming up with a major rewrite, I guess. They've been doing it for years, and
Yeah.
we'll see when that comes out. We'll see what happens there. But so it's going to be more block-like and all that. I wouldn't want to touch that first new release with a 10-foot pole for a couple of years until they solve it. But I mean, this is the one thing that you used to get more from a page builder. Elementor is similar. Is you did get all of this additional stuff, like Peter showed earlier, that the animation transition, if you remember that tooltip. Well, guess what? A couple of years ago, Disney Divi had this whole thing about, I want a scroll effect. I want to make it, horizontal, fade in and out. Again, with great power comes great responsibility, that whole Spider-Man thing. Like, it gave you so many bells and whistles that at the end you could make the most ridiculous looking website of things moving around. You could sticky things and all that. I think people eventually, once they got tired of playing with those things, a lot of people stepped back and said, "This is stupid," or "This site looks ugly." So they've pared things down. So there's a lot of what page builders give you. I will say though is they do expose a lot of additional CSS, the really CSS features for you. So if you're not good at CSS, for example, like this whole positioning thing, this you can do this through some lines of code of CSS to say, where do I want this element to show up on a page, and you can pinpoint, sort of stick something in a place and all that. So that's some of that stuff that was coming to, as I said, as the blocks themselves have gotten better and better, we've noticed that, and unfortunately this year this is my thing about WordPress maybe stagnating a little bit, is that we were getting, with every release, the blocks were getting better and better. They were getting more features. And in fact, I would almost say, I think Peter and I talked about this once before, I was a little bit afraid that eventually, if you follow this pattern of where they were going with these blocks, we may end up with this kind of junk like page builders. So in some ways, I'm happy for them to put the brakes on the blocks and say, make them go up to a certain point, because we have everything we need. Everything else, you can either find another block package that does what you really look for, or I hate to learn some CSS or copy a pattern to do it.
I put the link into the chat for the site that I often reference, Tyler.com, which is a great resource. He also has the variations block theme, which I mentioned earlier. But what's great about what you what you see, at Tyler.com is, what used to be sold as, oh, that's a theme, right? But these are well-designed pages of content made up of blocks packaged in block patterns, and you can go to each one and see exactly how he built it, and it's all core blocks. There's no other block package associated. It's just what you can do with core blocks. using yeah. So if you go in here and then you click on anything, um,
You can
and you
copy the
can
entire page or break down the parts or just get the images, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
yeah, just like the hero section, you can grab that, copy it, and paste it onto your site or whatever. Copy the whole page. These are core blocks, well designed, put into a block package. You'd obviously, in this case, change the imagery or whatever. And that's another thing what we remind people, especially if they're new to WordPress, where you see something and you go, well, I like that because that's the wedding theme. And it's like you can change those images to whatever you want.
Right.
That it's being presented in this case as a wedding theme, and it makes sense what you would do if you were doing, you know, a photography kind of thing, and this is what you want. But it doesn't mean you can't change this to anything else. You know, change the words in the image.
I will say, not to contradict myself, but sort of maybe going back to what Paul had asked earlier too about themes and stuff too. I will say that it's not really page builder specific, but I will say the page builder themes like Elementor and Divi and Beaver Builder, I will give them credit for a couple of innovations that are kind of beyond just building a page. You know, as silly as that sounds. For example, Divi and Elementor were some of the first ones to allow you to do things like basically build a library of sections and rows and things like that. Things that now you can do in WordPress. Now you can save your patterns, like Peter said. You can do all sorts of things with that. But these been around for years. So that was one thing that is, like I said, over time, I think the core builder in WordPress has allowed you to do that more of that stuff. I still do think I wouldn't recommend strictly going to Elementor or Divi for something like this, but I do think the theme builder functionality is still much more robust than back to the full site editor. So I don't have a site here with it, but for example, for Divi, you can do some pretty complex stuff here in Elementor as well. Like for example, I can build a landing page where I don't want any header or footer. I want just a clean page. So I can turn off the header and footer on specific pages. I can have certain pages where I want different footers on there, or different headers, or let's say, I only want a template to show up on certain pages and not others, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all of that level, I think, of detail that it's not there yet, at least in the core full site
Not in
editor.
core.
Yeah, it may be there eventually, but it's kind of stuck in the mud right
Not in
now.
core, but you have themes, classic and block. But classic where you have complete control over that, like a Cadence, like an Astra, right? Turning things on and off, that type of thing. Then you have there's a certain group of plugins that give you a lot. The block visibility plugin, I'll put the link in after that.
Yeah.
Phenomenal tool for making your content more dynamic based on any number of factors. Maybe you want to say good morning in the morning time or something like that. You have these factors of when to show something or not show something. That's the block visibility plugin. So that is very close to being core, partly because it's developed by somebody who is part of the core development team. But it's just that additional thing. But you're absolutely right. Where page builders, they set an expectation and created the tools and things like that. Now, okay, great. What now moves into WordPress core, and honestly, how does it move into it? Is it a plugin? Is it
Right.
in core? That type of thing. This ability in WordPress core now to save a pattern and be able to reference that pattern.
That again,
Totally
that's one of the
undersold.
things that's. Am I wrong, Peter, or is that in, I forget what the last release, is that in core for non-full site editing themes?
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
under,
It uses that the data view look. It goes to a different, which is unfortunate, quite honestly. But if you go under
I need a theme. Let me go to I think 2021 is one of the appearance design, maybe. No, I gotta find to find an old theme that I used to have 2019 on here or something. Yeah.
So you're looking for how they do patterns?
Well, I was trying to find like an old, like a non-block theme that has the where they show patterns. I thought 2021 was non-block, but I guess it was the in-between one. Anyway, yeah, it's more of a yes, you can view those shared patterns elsewhere
Yeah.
and manage
Well,
them like in a library.
the point being right now that for both full site editing or block themes and classic themes, you have the ability, if you went, you worked on this bunch of things and you liked it, you put them in a group, and now you can save that as a pattern that you can reuse throughout your site. And that's for out of core, both classic, and yeah, it should appear under appearance, but we can spend more time on that later. Um, I think we did a patterns meetup months ago, and I'm going to revisit in the fall too because I just think it's too important a skill to to know.
Oh, good.
Anything
Paul, I
else?
was going to say we didn't have any other questions. Paul, save the day.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that the evolution of WordPress is similar to what we went through back in prehistoric times when we used to write HTML by hand
Yeah,
and use tables, the layout.
yeah,
And then we got Dreamweaver,
yeah,
and that was, revolutionary, but it still produced some really kludgy code. And then we evolved into HTML5 and finally got CSS that uh, really worked. So I think we're seeing WordPress go through a similar evolution. And so, it's going to take time, but it's getting better.
It's funny you say that too, Paul, not to interrupt you, but I think one thing that you're right. One thing that also that isn't apparent to a lot of people is WordPress has evolved because of like CSS and the HTML5. HTML5, I remember again, I used to be a developer in a former life there was something dramatically new. It's like, oh, wait a minute, you have because for people who aren't familiar, like, most people probably what you see is just you think of as HTML when people talk about HTML5, it was like the standard that came out. But really, what it was almost kind of a combination of technologies working together. So it introduced some new things in your old HTML brackets and all that. But also, a lot of people refer to it as CSS and like JavaScript together. Those things kind of working together to make what we think of, today as like dynamic websites and things like that. So WordPress, you're right, has evolved with that. So a lot of things that WordPress is doing for you in the past, you would need to write your own code and do this and that. I think where full site editing, again, the kudos to that was that also was the first attempts to, I'd say, eliminate even that last piece of coder developer knowledge you needed, which is PHP. If you want to create a template in an old WordPress site, you need to know some PHP code. So it's not for the faint of heart. It's not hard, but it's just, if you're not a coder. So what they're trying to do with page builders and now WordPress full site editing is making something that feels more like a block editor to basically build not just pages, but templates, something even more, larger. So, and then the future is AI. Peter can just create a site with AI. You don't need anything. Just create me a WordPress site or like that. That's the future of WordPress, kind of. At least it's a starting point. So. Well, I'll tell you what, I don't see any other questions in the chat right now, but yeah, so I think again, this is our summer sessions here. This is what we're looking for. So definitely, if you like this, please come back next month. More questions, any topics on your minds. It's just kind of a free for all. We love doing the, what do I call it? Just sort of the, lightning round of things. There's always stuff changing. We can show more AI stuff next time too. I can show some interesting. I think one thing we talked about before was, and maybe this kind of fits into summer, but Peter, you had mentioned this topic of like, I didn't know you could do that with
right.
WordPress. But we can show some examples of that. I had one for tonight if we had nothing else. I can show a bit of that. And then in troubleshooting, if we had nothing to do today, I can show you this website that I'm having some issues with, but I'll save that for next time. It'll
Yeah,
stay broken.
and I saw so Tara's got a couple notes in there learning more about AI, and then
Yeah.
also with patterns and saving a page as a page template. And there's different ways of doing that, but definitely understanding what you can save as an entire pattern that you can reuse. Full site editing gets into like page templates and things like that. So we can definitely cover some of that with some quick demos and things.
Yep. So hopefully more to come. Hopefully everyone enjoyed this. And like I said, hopefully it starts to feel like summer a bit more. It's just been raining here all the time. But thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next month. And take care. Again, if you have other ideas, feel free to shoot them to us ahead of time. It's good to prep a little bit too. So have a good night, everyone. See ya.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye.